cómo los sistemas de parques urbanos pueden promover la salud y el bienestar. Es fundador del Centro para la Excelencia de Parques del Trust for Public Land y fue su director por casi 20 años. Es autor del libro Urban Green, Parques Innovadores para Ciudades Resurgentes, y también de numerosos estudios sobre financiamiento para parques, economía, diseño y defensa de parques urbanos, así como del tema salud. Es cofundador y trabajó para Rails to Trails Conservancy, una organización que busca preservar los rieles de ferrocarril abandonados para uso de la bicicleta y el peatón. Es cofundador de City Parks Alliance y expresidente de la Asociación de Bicicletas del Área de Washington. Señoras y señores, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Harnik.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you to Luis and his whole wonderful team. This is the most amazing conference. I'm involved with the City Parks Alliance in the United States, and when we had our first conference, National Parks Conference in the United States, we had 600 people, and you have 1,600 people here. So we are very impressed, very impressed. In fact, we are jealous. I'm going to try and speak a little bit slowly, since this is a multilingual conference. I want to help you all understand and help the translators. I think yesterday with Guillermo, one of the translators almost had a heart attack. So we'll try and make it easy for them. And I'm going to be talking about health and parks. When it comes to health and fitness, the United States, and I'm sure Mexico, are in a crisis. And let me show you how this crisis evolved from the beginning of time to today. Barely half the children and adults meet the recommended standards for physical activity. Fully 33% of U.S. adults engage in no leisure time physical activity at all. 33%. These people aren't all obese, of course, but the lack of exercise is certainly a risk factor in being overweight, and the United States is the most overweight nation on earth. It's well established that physical activity helps prevent obesity and other medical problems, and there's mounting evidence that providing places to exercise can improve health, and these places are primarily in parks. However, the mere presence of a park doesn't guarantee a healthier population. For one reason or another, thousands of acres of city parks are not serving the important purpose of helping people become healthier. An important question is, how can individual parks and an entire city park system actually help people be healthier and more fit? And this question is so important that my organization that I recently retired from, the Center for City Park Excellence in the U.S., organized a special little conference of experts to get together and study this very question. We got 22 professionals in many different fields together: public health, mental health, parks and recreation, landscape architecture, non-motorized transportation, urban planning, and we all got together in a hotel room and we locked the door and talked for 2 days, and it was very interesting. We all learned from each other. Everybody had preconceived ideas, and then when we talked it through, we all learned some new ideas. And we looked at everything about parks, from trails and sports fields and playgrounds and drinking fountains and bathrooms, and how they're provided and how people put up signs for them. And then we also looked at other factors around the outside of parks, like how easy it is to get to the park and whether you could walk there or bicycle there or take the bus. And also the very important question of the population density around parks, whether the parks are surrounded by just low one family per house housing or apartment buildings. And then we talked about important issues like safety and programming. And based on this work, the group came to agreement on the single most important principle for a park system to foster mental and physical health and well-being. It must be well used by the public. And some people might say, well, of course. But actually, many people that work on parks and love parks don't always think that way. Many people think, I want this park for myself, and if I could have a beautiful park with nobody in it except for me, that would be the best. But that's not how we're going to get people to be healthy. So if you start from the presumption that for a city park to be well used, how do you get that to happen? And so we came up with 6 major areas. This was the group that did the work. We came up with 6 major areas to focus attention on. That it should support a mixture of uses, many different things happening in the parks. It should lead to stress reduction by not having much traffic in the park and not having tension in the park. It should offer beauty and great design. It should provide proximity and accessibility and co-location so that the park is mixed in with other activities in the city. It should be an interconnected web of trails and parks, and we should foster partnerships for health. And I'm going to talk about each one of these things. Physical activity is key to health, and city parks are a resource for active urbanites. But many parks don't make it easy to exercise. Some are too small. Some are too big and maybe too scary and confusing. Some are too far away. Some are just not pretty enough to want to go to. Some of them are very specialized. They're just athletic facilities for very athletic people, but not for regular people. Others might be just forests that have an occasional trail, but are not that interesting for young people to find something to do there. So really, many parks just don't offer a wide enough range of activities for people to go out and use them and be active and become healthy. It's kind of like the difference between an old-fashioned hardware store, the kind of hardware store where you walk in and there's so many wonderful things to look at and think about, compared to a convenience store where they just have a few chocolate bars and a few sodas, and they're all the same, and you don't really want to go there. For instance, a golf course can serve a few hundred people per day, but if you add a running track, I'm missing a slide here. If you add a running track around the outside of the golf course, you can serve thousands of people. You still have the golf course, but other people that don't play golf can run around, see the beautiful golf course, and become healthier. A playground is a nice space for small children to run around and practice their skills. But if you add a fitness zone with adult equipment, the adults can use the fitness zone while they're watching their children. And then as the children become older, they can come over and use the more sophisticated equipment. A softball diamond, baseball diamond in the U.S. is a good place if you have 18 people to all play together. But just an open field without any structure can serve way more people. And they can kick a ball, throw a frisbee, play catch, throw sticks to their dog, and do much more. Thick woods are wonderful protected places for wildlife, but if you add a trail and a bench and little grassy openings for people to look at the view, you get much more use than just the woods. Even if a park offers many spaces for physical activity, not everyone knows how to take advantage of them. Some users need to learn new skills, some need encouragement, some need an exercise regimen, some need social support. In a word, they need programming. This is tremendously important, and I know some of our other speakers are going to talk about this in more detail. But many people don't know really how to use a park or what to do there. So you need programming to help them, and plus to make it more fun. And if you're going to have programming, you need marketing to tell people that you have programming. You have to make sure people know all the activities that are going on in the park. Okay, number 2 is stress reduction. As beautiful, peaceful islands of greenery, parks can really help reduce stress and promote mental health. But this can only be true if the park itself is not a frightening place and is a welcoming environment. An empty park, or one that is overrun with so much activity that makes you feel stress, isn't going to help your mental condition. Activities that can provoke stress might include panhandling or loud music or groups of people that make it unpleasant and frightening, or even you want to have people riding bicycles, but if you have people riding bicycles really fast through the park and pushing people off the trails, that doesn't make it a better setting. So what you need to do in your parks is have rules, and this is a park that my organization built in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the rules are also in Spanish. So make rules so that people know what is expected of them, what they're allowed to do and what they're not supposed to do, and then maybe have some police and some officers there. This is the Alamo, and the police, make people feel comfortable in the park. In San Antonio, the police even go around in bicycles, and they even go around in boats. So they help maintain the rules and make people realize that the park is a civilized place. It's not just a wild woods for people to do whatever they want. So a special problem in the United States, and maybe in Mexico and other places too, is automobiles in the park. And some people think that you need automobiles to bring people to the park, but actually the studies have shown that automobiles actually reduce the number of people in the park. They make the park experience less inviting and less enjoyable, and they take up space, and sometimes they smell bad, and sometimes the parking lots take up a lot of space. So in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, they have no cars on Sunday, and they allow cars on Saturday, but not on Sunday. And so you can see the tremendous difference in a situation where there's no cars and where cars are allowed. And even in parts of the United States that are very, very car-oriented, like in Kansas City, they're starting to close some of the park roads to cars and just make them open for walking and bicycling and roller skating and playing with hula hoops. And when you get the cars off the streets, all kinds of wonderful things start happening. People love having open spaces. So a completely different park-like space that can reduce stress and promote health is the community garden. Community gardens have been around for more than 100 years, but only in recent decades in the United States have city park departments actually incorporated community gardens into their systems. Sometimes the Parks Department finds a place in the park where they can create community gardens, and sometimes, like in New York City and some other places, the neighborhood says, we have these beautiful gardens, we want them to be part of the park department. So either way, more and more agencies, park agencies, have community gardens, and they are just wonderful for the community. Of course, they produce food, and people love to be in nature and produce food, but even if you're not producing food, they produce community and social connections and mental relaxations and feelings of self-worth. At the very unhealthy side of the spectrum, of course, is violence, actual violence. That's the scariest thing, violence in the parks. Sometimes a park's reputation is worse than things really are. Every now and then you hear there's been a murder, and then people take the body and they put it in the park. And so then people think, well, there was a murder in the park. Actually, people are just using the park as a way to dump a body, and that's partly the case because the park isn't heavily used. Well-used parks, of course, people aren't going to misuse that way. But of course, it's important that parks have to be safe, and safety is a difficult issue of where the neighborhood is and how well the park is monitored and policed. And it's important to realize that not everyone perceives parks in the same way. And one thing that we found in the United States is that wealthier people who live in better neighborhoods and have safer parks think parks are wonderful, and they think everybody must love parks. And poorer people who live in maybe more dangerous neighborhoods are a little bit more cautious about their parks, and they don't necessarily assume that all parks are terrific. So it's important to have that conversation between the people that just assume that everybody loves parks and others who say, I would love my park if I felt comfortable there. And that has a lot to do with how well they're used for people to exercise and become healthy. So one effective way of increasing park use in more dangerous areas is by getting people together and running together or doing things together. In one city, I heard a policeman would even come along on a run with a bunch of women, and he would get them started, and then they would feel comfortable running through the park. The other thing is to just have all kinds of group activities in the park, from pulling down the vines to cleaning up the litter, to planting trees, to showing movies out in the park in the evening, and maybe having a volunteer safety patrol. And in some cases, the Parks Department itself, and I know many of you don't really have parks departments, but that's the goal, to have a park department for every city. Sometimes the park department itself has its own volunteers, or sometimes they use other organizations like the YMCA or the Boys Club or the Girls Club, and they come in and do special activities. Okay, thirdly, beauty and great design. Some people say to me, so beauty like this is in Cincinnati. Some people say to me, you can run, you don't have to run in the park, you can run anywhere. And you could run on the street, you could run on a place like this, but it's a lot nicer to run in a place like this. It really makes you want to do this every day or twice a day. And then playgrounds. This patch of asphalt was called a playground, But my organization, Trust for Public Land in New York and in some other cities, takes these rundown, unattractive spaces and turns them into beautiful playgrounds that the children themselves help design. We use the ideas from the children, and sometimes they come up with very good ideas. In one case, they said, let's have a hair braiding area for the girls to just go and braid each other's hair. And nobody had ever thought of that before until the kids did. So, of course, a playground is a wonderful place for children to be healthy. And if you can keep children from getting obese in their early years, that goes a long way to keep them slim and healthy for the rest of their lives. Or even just plain woods. How many park forests do you go past and you never even would want to go into? How do you even get into a place like this? But if you have a trail, it becomes very inviting for walking. And even a trail like this brings people in. And you can put a lot of trails through forest. You don't need, even if a trail is just 100 feet from another trail, you still feel like you're very deep in the forest bathing, but there's enough trails to have a lot of people using them. Now, signage is one of the most overlooked amenities, and actually is one of the least expensive amenities to do signs. I always say parks without signs are like libraries without book numbers. You have this whole fabulous thing in front of you, and you don't know where to go or what it is when you get there. You don't know the history. You don't know the hours that it's open, all kinds of things. Sometimes parks don't even have a sign saying the name of the park. So when you tell a friend, let's go down to that park, it's like, what is the name of that park? I don't even know that. So signs are tremendously important, and they make the park feel like it's really an important part of the city. All kinds of different signs. Fourthly, proximity, accessibility, and co-location. The closer the park and the easier it is to get to, the more likely that it is going to be used. On the other hand, if you live far from a park, it's less likely that you're going to use it. So this has obvious implications for public health, but recognizing the problem isn't always easy to solve. Sometimes it's easy enough to just build a bridge or build a walkway or cut down a fence and put in a staircase, because some parks might be blocked. The park might be just on the other side of a fence, but it might be blocked by steps or fences or a steep wall or a cliff or railroad tracks or a highway. So many parks are blocked by highways in the United States. You say, how can I get there? And so you have to talk to the government about if 1,000 people live here and there's a highway and then there's a beautiful park on the other side, it's worth it to build a pedestrian bridge. That's something the government should do for the people. Or sometimes even just putting in a crosswalk with a sign saying, stop driving here and let us cross over into our park with our children. So people are more likely to use parks that are close to where they live. This is in Boston. This is a tiny little park. It's only half a hectare, but it is tremendously heavily used because it's right downtown. Everybody at lunchtime or before work or at lunchtime or after work goes there because it's so beautiful and it's such a nice social place to be, and you don't have to go very far to use it. In other cases, this is a bicycle trail in Minneapolis. In other cases, after this trail was built, this bicycle shop said, can we locate next to this trail so that the people that are bicycling by can get their bikes fixed, can get new tires, or can just, and then they put in a little cafe too, can just stop and get a coffee while they're going by. The best thing is to have a lot of housing next to parks. Now, this is Central Park in New York. There's probably no place quite like this because it has so much housing. But and it's a beautiful park. One reason it's such a successful park is that thousands and thousands, millions of people are within walking distance of this park. Nobody drives to Central Park. There's no place to park. And everybody walks. So some people just walk right across the street, some people walk a few blocks, and they have a beautiful facility to be healthy in. If you can't have a situation like that, you want to be able to provide trails for people to skate or to bike or walk to. And if you have a good bicycle network leading up to your park, you can get much more value out of it because bicycling brings in 16 times as many people as walking for the same distance. Since you can bicycle 4 times faster than you can walk, then when you take that dimension, you can pull in 16 times as many people. In Houston, they actually added they were building a new transit system, trolley system, and the park people said, please put your trolley next to our park. They were going to put it someplace else, but they moved it so that they had 2 stops, one on either side of the park. And same in Portland, Oregon, they have a bus system all through the park. So you get off the trolley and you take a bus through the park. So an interconnected park web. Now, if you don't have a big park, but you have a lot of small parks, the best way to turn small parks into a big park is to connect them with trails. And here's a trail in Baltimore. And one excellent way of doing that is through abandoned railroads. The trail on the left, which is in Seattle, used to be a railroad. It went out of business. They took out the tracks, they took out the ties, and they paved it over, and it's a beautiful bike trail that goes to the university and all through the northern part of the city. That's the one on the right. The one on the left is in Cleveland, and the railroad tracks are still there, but they added on a trail next to them so that there's no cars and there's no red lights. And then lastly, partnerships for health. And this is something we can all do no matter what country we're in. Partnerships, using the power of people working together. Partnerships can be immensely powerful by leveraging the strength of one collaborator with another. One agency might have land and another company might have money, or one company might have the ability to put out a lot of announcements, but they don't have any people on their lists. Another company might have a tremendous number of people on their lists, but they don't have a way of putting out announcements. So there are tremendous strengths in these partnerships. And especially with health companies and health insurance companies and hospitals. One of my favorite collaborations is in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's called the Medical Mile. And it's an old railroad corridor. The city of Little Rock bought this railroad corridor, but they didn't have money to do anything with it. And so a clinic called the Heart Clinic of Arkansas said, we will raise some money to turn this old railroad track into a trail that everybody can use, and we'll call it the Medical Mile, and we'll have educational exhibits as well as a trail, so people can learn about their heart, about breathing, about bicycle helmet safety, about their bones, all kinds of things. And it's like a little museum of medical health. Plus, it's a trail that you can go out and walk and bicycle on. And so the doctor said, we will raise the money. And they said, we think maybe we can raise $350,000. And they told all their patients, and people are so in love with their doctors, and they believe their doctors, they raised the $350,000 in 3 months. And so they said, well, actually, maybe we can raise more money to do a better job. And they moved the goal up to $2 million, and they raised that too. So this is the kind of partnership of the doctors and the park departments and the trail opportunities that we can all do in all of our different towns and cities. So today's efforts to design urban parks for their health benefits and to create health-enhancing parks and programming kind of comes a full circle, because when Frederick Law Olmsted and the other early park people created their parks, they wanted a place to get away from the air pollution and the water pollution and the noise and everything in the cities. And now we have different, in the U.S. the air is better than it used to be, hopefully in Mexico too. But now we have other kinds of health problems that parks can once again help us solve through some of these methods and through the tremendous turnout at this conference. Like I said, I'm so impressed that you all came together to do this. I know that Mexico has a long way to go to having a great park system, but I know you can do it. We in the United States would love to help out in any way we can, and we look forward to coming back and visiting some of your great parks when we're back here again. Thank you very much.